So apropos or related to the last panel, I just want to gauge the audience. Raise your hand if you think that there's, Brad, not yet. Let me finish the question. Cool, thanks. Raise your hand if you think there's no such thing as a utility token legally. Good, okay. Raise your hand if you think obviously the agency that regulates securities in the United States is the Securities and Exchange Commission. So raise your hand if you think that the SEC has the right to declare that any token is a security. You're a brave man. You've been raising your hand a couple times. And as I always say, raise your hand if you're not going to raise your hand no matter what I say. Awesome. Okay. So there's a lot of controversy and there's a lot of development that's been happening in the United States when it comes to token sales. And we'll get into some of the nitty-gritty and some of the details, but believe it or not, there have not really been any successful security token offerings, STOs, done in the United States yet, meaning public sales of security tokens. That appears to be about to change because we're going to discuss, there's a regulation in the US that the SEC put out called Regulation A+. And the very first Regulation A+ looks like it's about to be approved. Once this gets approved, it's going to open up the floodgates for legal STOs in the United States. And I'm going to not only explain how Regulation A+ works, but I'm going to give you some sneaky tricks that I don't think the SEC has thought about when it comes to Regulation A+. Now, you're welcome to take photos of the slides as they come up, but if you add me on LinkedIn or on Telegram, I can send you the deck, and I'm happy to share it. Right? So don't drive yourself crazy trying to take photos of every single slide, though you're welcome to. I'm happy to share the deck. Okay, so Blockstack has filed to do a Regulation A+ offering in the United States. The SEC, as the SEC does, has been sort of dragging their heels in terms of approving it, but it's literally one of those any day kind of things. Just real quick, I'm a United States attorney, or I should say a California-based US attorney. Happy to share this presentation. And again, this law is information. This is not settled law yet. This can be a little bit speculative and creative. So, as they say, DYOR, do your own research. Okay, we can move on here. Who here has Instagram? Does anyone not have Instagram? Really? Really? Got it. You're just trying to hide all your crypto. I understand what's going on. So you always see on Instagram FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and FOMO. You see FOMO more often. My goal from this talk is to overcome U.S. Securities Law FUD so that you don't get FOMO. So I'm going to use those terms a lot here. So okay. Who wants to learn everything about U.S. Securities Law in 10 minutes or less? Good. I went to USC Law School. I paid $100,000 for this. You're going to get it for free. Right? So we're going to give a really fast class on U.S. Securities Law. And by the time you're done with this, you'll know more than 99% of the people promoting ICOs. Right? So in the U.S., here's just something to keep in mind. The term security is a defined term. Okay, it's a defined term. It is the two core laws that form the basis of U.S. securities law are the 1933 Securities Act and the 1934 Securities Exchange Act. Both of those laws define the term security. Okay? And the SEC's jurisdiction is based on that definition. So the SEC does not, just to relate to something that was in a prior panel, the SEC does not have the ability to regulate commodities. It doesn't have the right to regulate dogs. The SEC cannot declare war, and it cannot raise taxes. It can only regulate securities. So the SEC could define anything as a security. then it would actually have the right to regulate anything. It could just define, sir, are you a security?
I not understand.
Okay, he said yet. Okay, that's common. Here, sir, are you a security?
I was not following this.
And then that's good. You can, okay. Is Bitcoin up or down? Okay, fine. Who in the audience knows that they're not a security? Just someone volunteer. Thank God. Okay. I've never actually gotten stuck at that part, but here we go. Okay, so not everything on the planet is a security. The SEC does not have the legal power to just say that a token is a security. So when Jay Clayton, the chairman of the SEC, got up there in front of Congress and claimed that he hasn't seen an ICO that isn't a public offering of securities, he was being, I think, purposely vague and obtuse because not everything is a security. It's a defined term. So when the SEC acts like every token is a security, don't believe them. And they've been dialing back this position because they become confronted by other parties about scaring people away. Now, here's the core rule of US securities law. This is what scares everyone. Okay? The default rule in the United States is that any sale or offer of sale, or any sale or offer to sell securities in the United States must be registered, and that's the term, registered with the SEC before it can proceed. The default rule is that unless you register that sale or offer a sale with the SEC before proceeding, it's unlawful. Unlawful is a term that means potentially criminal. Okay, so that's kind of scary. That seems to cover everything on the planet. Any sale or offer of sale of security, by default, needs to be registered with the SEC before it's sold. Now, who in God's name would want to register every sale or offer sale of securities with the SEC? That's expensive, long process. You have to wait for them to approve it. That's why everyone freaks out, because that's the default rule. We're going to talk about how to make the default rule not apply. Now, just to go over some other terms that are useful, when do you want to register a sale with the SEC? That normally happens in the context of an initial public offering or an IPO. Okay, when Apple or Google or Uber go public through a large sale, they'll do an initial public offering. That's when an issuer, a company, sells its own securities to the public for the first time. That's when registration is appropriate. Now, IPOs used to be the American dream. You know, you start your company in your parents' garage, you build it up, you get some early investors, you sell your company's stock for billions and billions of dollars by going public. That's what everyone used to want. Okay? IPOs have a function. They're potentially useful. They're potentially great. But IPOs in the US have become harder and harder to engage in because of the expense involved. And there's also some other consequences of doing an IPO. Part of the reason that people went to crypto and to blockchain is that the traditional way of becoming liquid, the traditional way of getting your investment money back through IPOs became unavailable. So people tried to do an end run around IPOs by going to crypto and by going to blockchain. Because no token's a security, right? I mean, obviously that's not right. Okay, so you guys just completed the first month of securities law in the United States. Who feels like they're ready for a degree? There you go. I'm telling you, I paid a lot of money to USC, you're getting this for free. Okay, so securities is a defined term, and the default rule is that you need to register with the SEC. Okay. Now, here's another little wrinkle with registering with the SEC and going public, and it's going to tie into Regulation A+. When you go public, when you register your sale of securities with the SEC, you're not done. You're now what's known as a public reporting company. The process you just did by having an IPO is going public, and now you're a public reporting company, which means that you have these ongoing compliance requirements. You have to file annual reports, quarterly reports. You have to file a report anytime there's a significant change in the company. You have to file a report if you go to the bathroom. Okay, it's very expensive and it's a very difficult ongoing process to be a public company. You also have to comply with certain accounting rules and certain fiduciary obligations. It's a pain. All right, so here's the big trap that's going to get everyone in crypto that's done an ICO. There's two ways to become a public company and have to deal with all this junk. The first way, of course, is to conduct an IPO. Here's the trap that's going to get everyone. Even if you sell your tokens that are securities privately, or you sell them outside of the United States, like you're Binance, and you exclude the United States from your sale, or every other IEO platform. Once over 2,000 US investors get their hands on your security, you're now a public company in the US and have to comply with reporting requirements. I'll say that again. Once over, it depends on, this applies to certain kinds of securities, but the general rule is that once over 2,000 people, US parties of record, have your securities, you're now a public reporting company in the US. So if I'm a French company and I just sell all my securities to French people, and in secondary market trading, what happens after that first sale, more than 2,000 American investors get their hands on my securities, guess what? I need to register with the SEC as a publicly traded company in the US. Because now it's deemed to have entered the United States market. How many ICOs do you think are thinking about that? I'll give you the answer, 0. Okay, get ready, that's gonna be the wave of litigation that's gonna happen in 2020 and 2021. You're now 2/3 done with US securities law, congratulations. All right, now, the prior panel, the panel before then, was talking about the different kinds of tokens. The term utility token is a little bit controversial. I understand Michael's point. Let's just use it for now. All right, you can say consumption token, you can use whatever you want. All the rules about securities in the US apply equally well to security tokens. But they also, when the law in the US does not apply to securities, then if a token's not a security, it doesn't apply to that token. Right? Again, the SEC has a limited jurisdiction based on the definition of security. So what is a security token? What is it in real life? Right? It's a token that provides some sort of economic benefit based on the performance of the company that created a platform or the platform itself. Some kind of economic benefit. Not the use of it provides a benefit, but sort of a derivative economic benefit for the performance of the platform. What often matters when you have a case that's not entirely clear is what was the motivation of the person buying the token in the first place? Did they buy it because they wanted to use the platform? Wow, this Ethereum virtual machine is really great. Or did they buy because, wow, I can buy Ethereum for 30 cents and sell it for $1,000? If they have a strong profit, I see you got that one. Okay, if they have a strong profit motivation when they're buying the token, that's and if that's common, that's a very strong indicator that it's a security token. You can contrast that with a utility token. A utility token is merely like a software license. It's the right to access a platform. So the example I always give is you can think of Office 365 or Google Apps. Suppose you had a blockchain version of those platforms and you could access them using a token. Maybe even like access Facebook using a token. Wow, who thought of that? Right? If you took Google Apps and you put it on the blockchain and you had tokenized access to Google Apps without adding new facts, that's clearly not a security. Clearly. Okay, it's just a software license. So when the SEC and the rest of them were saying that everything on the planet, including my doggy, is a security, that's clearly legally wrong. Again, there's no way that's a security. Okay, now I have long videos on YouTube, really good videos on YouTube that explain exactly what a security is in depth. I'm not gonna beat that to complete depth right here. Okay, so you just completed 1 semester of securities law for free. Congratulations. Now, here's how people have been avoiding registering their tokens in the United States. Here's their traditional methods. Traditional meaning for the past 2 or 3 years. Method number 1 is they would attempt to sell tokens that weren't securities. Well, my token just lets me order food online. It's not a security. Of course, I'm telling you, you can buy it for a penny and I'll sell it for $1. So they would sell tokens that they believed or pretended to believe weren't security tokens. If it's not a security token, you don't need to register it with the SEC. What's the other top technique for not registering your token with the SEC? Well, people have been trying to avoid US investors, right? They do their ICO, IEO, private sale, whatever, outside the US. But remember what we discussed. That's wrong, okay? Because if over 2,000 US parties get a hold of your securities and they're a certain type of security, that initial sale outside to the US didn't save you. You're now a public reporting company in the US. This is an ambush city, right? And then the third way, and this is a good one, to avoid registering your offering securities is to do what's called an exempt offering. It's a Regulation D offering. This is a carve-out. This is a safe harbor that the SEC has provided. By the way, I appreciate you tracking me with the camera. I didn't realize the hard work you're doing here. This is the exemption that the SEC has provided to avoid registration. And I've done a ton of these, and this is very useful. Again, I have long videos on YouTube about this. All right, let's talk about utility tokens a little bit more. Again, I asked at the beginning who believes or doesn't believe that there's such a thing as a utility token in the US. Despite what the SEC was saying before, the world has changed in the past month or so. The SEC has admitted that not every token is a security. Okay? There is a framework. It's not very good, but there's a framework that the SEC put out where they supposedly help people decide whether or not something is a security. There's also what's called a no action letter that the SEC issued saying that a particular case of a token, one that they looked at, wasn't a security. So now the world has changed. There's a big difference between saying there's no such thing as a security token and saying, well, yes, it's rare, but it's possible. Because now the door just opened up. That's number one. Who's heard of Kik or Kin in that lawsuit? Tone, of course. So now, of course, it's not clear sailing because there's a company that did an ICO, Kik, or it's for the Kik messenger, rather. They had every argument in the world, well, almost every argument in the world, to claim that their tokens were utility tokens and not securities when sold. The SEC said, it's a security token. Kik said, no, it's not. Well, guess what? Now there's a lawsuit. So we'll see how that plays out. Basically, Kik went to SEC and he said, we dare you, we double dare you to sue us. And SEC said, fine, the taxpayers are paying our legal bills, no problem, we'll sue you. So now it's fun. Actually, let me go back. Can I go back? Yeah. Now here's the wrinkle on utility tokens. It's legally clear that there is such a thing as a non-security token. Can we agree with that now since the SEC admitted it? Just raise your hand. Sir, raise your hand just so I can feel happy about myself. All right, thank you. Here's the thing to keep in mind. Yes, it's true that there is such a thing as a utility token. Not every token is a security, but what were ICOs all about? ICOs are basically crowdfunding Kickstarter campaigns. They're saying, we don't have a platform yet. We don't have it yet. What we want is for you to surrender your valuable Bitcoin in exchange for some tokens that we're going to give to you. Those tokens don't work yet, but we're going to use all the money, all the Bitcoin, all the fiat that you sent to us. We're going to use that to build the platform. And then once the platform is built, those tokens will have functionality. Okay? In other words, they're selling what I call pre-functional utility tokens as part of an ICO. That's your traditional ICO. I have an idea. It doesn't work yet. I'm going to sell you tokens now at a low price. I'm going to use the funds that we generate from that sale, build the platform, and then the tokens will work. Now, are those pre-functional security tokens, are those pre-functional utility tokens securities or not? Well, if you know the answer, you're going to be a very popular and well-paid attorney. The position in the US and many other jurisdictions is yes, they are. At least in the beginning, before those tokens are functional, they're treated like securities. Why? Well, the reasoning is kind of dense, but the idea is because these things don't work, because the platform is not built yet, because people are buying them at such a huge discount, they are securities-like. Now, think about Ethereum. Think about what Vitalik did. Okay, the Ethereum virtual machine was not working when he did the initial sale of the Ether. It only got to be working later. Okay, that whole Ether sale, that was an unlawful sale of securities. Right? Tony, you agree with that? You have a video on it. Okay, well, you can't argue with that. So, why did they get away with it? I don't know, but I really like to be in the room about the SEC deciding whether or not they were early. Yeah, there's two ways. You can either be smarter, early, or both. Okay, it's good to be smart and early. But between smart and early, I'd rather be early. So Ethereum did exactly this model. They sold pre-functional tokens and built the platform. Those were securities when they sold it. Now, here's the breakthrough that happened the last month or so. For the first time ever in the history of securities, the SEC admitted that something that started off as a security can stop being a security based on how things evolved. So, the SEC has said recently that Ethereum, Ether, was probably a security when it was initially sold, but now, because the platform has developed and become decentralized, it's no longer a security. It's like a quantum phase shift of legal status. It started off as a security, but people actually built the platform and it got decentralized, and now they're no longer treating it like a security. That's a planning tool that a lawyer can drive a bus through. Okay, a token that will change its nature once it gets to a certain point. And this is Commissioner Hinman from the SEC pointing out digital assets can evolve into an instrument that is no longer needs to be regulated as such. So things can start off as security, not be a security, turn into a currency, turn into a dog, turn back into a security, all based on how they're being used and what's going on. There's the kick lawsuit. Okay, here's another technique for avoiding the US registering with the SEC. There's not selling to SEC parties, US parties, but I want to make a big point about all these IEOs. They may pretend to do AML, they may pretend to do KYC, they may pretend to avoid US investors, they may actually even really be doing it. Okay? Some of them are really doing AML and KYC and trying to avoid US investors. But if they make a mistake, they're not going to save you. Okay, if the SEC serves you with a subpoena or sues you or brings a civil action, that not US exchange is not going to come to the US District Court in Washington, D.C. and defend you. Okay, it is ultimately your responsibility as someone doing an IEO or any one of these sales to run your own KYC, AML, and avoid US investors. Just keep that in mind. All right, now we're going to dive into this a little bit more because this is very useful. Regulation D, especially based on how it changed recently, is a gift from God, and a lot of that comes into Regulation A+. With Regulation D, this is the way to avoid registering with the SEC that actually works. Based on recent changes in the law, you can advertise your offering to everyone. You don't need to restrict your advertising. Okay? This is no longer a quote-unquote private placement. You now have what I call a public private placement. You can advertise your sale to everyone, including in the US. Okay? The key to being compliant and not having to register with the SEC is that you only actually end up completing your sale with a certain kind of investor called accredited investors. There's a whole long explanation of that, but the short version is people who are either wealthy, smart, or both. Okay? If they're sufficiently wealthy, smart, or both, they can buy your securities. If they're stupid or have no money or both, then they can't. Okay, Tone, I'm going to use you, for example. So one definition of an accredited investor is someone who has over $1 million of net assets, not counting their personal residence. Okay, so just play along. Tone, are you an accredited investor?
Sure.
Okay, so what Tone just did is he self-certified that he's an accredited investor. I asked him, he said yes. I either believe him or I choose to believe him, right? Okay, so you just self-certified. Here's how the new Reg D works. Tone, are you an accredited investor?
Yes, I am.
Tone, will you show me your tax returns and prove it so I can verify that you're an accredited investor?
My accountant doesn't like me sharing my tax returns.
Okay, yeah, I get that a lot. So that's the difference between someone self-certifying as an accredited investor and me verifying that they're an accredited investor. Under the new Regulation D, I can advertise to everyone. I can sell unlimited numbers of security tokens. Anything, $20 billion to a billion US people, even though there's not a billion. But I need to verify, I need to confirm that each one of them is accredited. Okay, and that's in Rule 506C. Here's the issue with Regulation D that Reg A solves. Tone, suppose you did verify to me that you're an accredited investor. Thank you for showing me your tax returns. I know that was rough. All right? And you buy $1 million worth of security tokens. Do you have the legal right to the next day turn around and sell them? What do you think?
If they're on an exchange.
No. Okay. Close, no. The general rule with a Reg D offering, and again, it's Reg D, okay, is that when I sell securities, it's okay, we all know you're good. That's why I'm picking on. The general idea with a Reg D offering, and this cameraman's doing a great job, is that, yes, I can sell these securities to anyone who's accredited and they verify it. But they have to hold on to those tokens, those securities, for at least 1 year under Rule 144. Part of the reason people love crypto and blockchain is that they could buy Ethereum for 30 cents, sell it for $1,000 as soon as it went there, and then recycle into the next investment. Everyone was trying to do an end run around what's called this restricted securities issue. But of course, now that we're admitting that a lot of these tokens are securities, that Rule 144 holding period still applies. That's not good for founders, and it's not good for initial investors. They want to be able to cycle and get liquidity as quickly as possible. I wonder if there's an answer to all this. Restricted security, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Who's more or less with me so far? Well, that's good. Considering, who's had coffee? Okay, I see a correlation between the people who are with me and the people who had coffee. All right, so Regulation A+ is going to be the godsend when it comes to doing ICOs, yes, ICOs, and STOs, and getting around all these issues. And I'm going to just dive into the Jedi level moves that come from this. Let's do a real quick overview of Regulation A+. Regulation A+ is like a miniature IPO. Remember IPOs and what they're like? People don't do IPOs right now because they're expensive and become a public reporting company, but they were really good, and in some cases are still really good, for getting people liquidity. It's a way to realize the value of your investment. You start the company in the garage, you sell it a couple years later for several $billion. Regulation A+ has brought back IPOs to what I call the miniature IPO. Okay, it just became real again. Under Reg A+, you can sell up to $50 million worth of your tokens per year without doing a full registration with the SEC. Now, $50 million isn't a ton, but it's still really good, and it's a lot more than a bunch of ICOs that have happened so far. And you can do it every year for 3 years. Right? You can get a lot of liquidity from doing an A+. And if you do a Reg A+ offering, it's not just the issuer that gets to escape registration, but early investors can piggyback on that sale and sell their own securities as a limited portion of that $50 million. So, are you with me? Can I pick on you? Niet? Who speaks English and is with me? There you go. Okay. There you go. So suppose if you start a new company, what are you going to call that company? Okay, we'll call it Hold On. Okay, so Hold On Inc. All right, good job. So he started a company called Hold On Inc. Hold On Inc. can do a Reg A+ and sell its own securities, but if you're an early founder and investor in Hold On Inc., you may want to get some money for your interest. Well, as part of that 50 million, you can sell, say, 5 million. Does that math work? Yeah, it does. Of your own securities as part of that Reg A+. That's pretty good, right? You get to piggyback. I think I'm going to Hold On because that sounds lovely. Okay, so 50 million per 12-month period. Like Reg D, you can advertise your sale to everyone. Unlike Reg D, and here's the gold, Anyone can buy your security. You do not have to check if they're accredited. You don't need to take the word for it. You don't need to verify it. Tone, I'm walking towards you. You know, I have a Reggae Plus called Hold On Inc., and I want you to buy from it. Are you accredited? I don't care, because anyone can buy a Reggae Plus. Just buy my stock, okay? So you can advertise to everyone. You can even use an internet platform, like a website, heaven forbid, to sell, and anyone can buy it. Now, of course, there's details and nuance here, but this is a very powerful tool. Now, unlike a regular sale of securities to the public, you don't register your A+ with SEC, but you do qualify it. So it's a little bit technical. You do have to get their approval before you do the sale, but it's not as difficult of a process as doing a full registration. You also can test the waters. That means you can speak to certain institutional investors in advance and get their opinions and points of view without violating the law. And when you look to qualify your A+ sale, the documents you file with SEC are not public. Why does that matter? Well, you may have some special technology. You may have some marketing plans. You may have something where you filed for a patent, but it's not yet granted, or maybe you're working on patent filing. You don't necessarily want your documents public while they're being reviewed by the SEC. So this is great for small companies that need their software or their platform or their strategy protected. You can qualify, you can start the process of qualifying your A+ with the SEC, but that does not mean that everyone else can see what you're doing. Your competitor does not have access to your secret stuff. All right, now here's where we're getting to some Jedi level stuff. Remember, how do we use the SEC's position on pre-functional tokens, not against them, let's say, but to our advantage? Suppose the SEC is right. Suppose that tokens before they're functional are securities. Suppose Ether was a security before it became functional, like this pre-functional tokens. Well, if the pre-functional tokens are securities, that means you can use Reggae Plus to sell them. I wonder if the SEC thought about that. Okay? If something's clearly a security token, it's a no-brainer you can use Reggae Plus. If something's clearly a utility token, you can't use A+. Reggae Plus is only for securities. But if you have a pre-functional utility token like Ether before the platform got built, that's a security, right, SEC? Well, let's use Reggae Plus to sell it to the public. I'm waiting for the light bulbs to go over people's heads. The ICOs of utility tokens, in other words, are back because you can use Reggae Plus to register them or to qualify them with the SEC, do it in a legally approved way, and build your platform with the proceeds, which is pretty neat stuff. Also, when you're doing your fully compliant Reggae Plus offering, then you can do true AML and true KYC and not have to rely on some non-security, non-US exchange to do it for you, and then get that knock on the door a month later when it turns out that 2,000 Americans bought your securities. Right? This brings back home the ability to ensure compliance on your sale. Now here's what gets interesting. Suppose I do a Reggae Plus of my security tokens, my ICO tokens. And as we were discussing, the old rule is that you have to hold on to them for a year, not with Reggae Plus. If you do a Reggae Plus sale, your tokens are immediately liquid. If Ethereum had done a Reggae Plus sale, sold the Ether for 30 cents and then went to 300, Tone would not have to wait a year before selling the Ether. He could immediately the next day go ahead and sell it and get those gains. Right, you get immediate liquidity for your investors and for the buyers. In other words, they're not restricted. Oops, let me go back one. Okay, now as I mentioned, when a company goes public under either a full registration or by mistake, once they hit 2,000 investors, you're now a public reporting company. You have all these ongoing compliance requirements. Now, Reggae Plus companies have a much lighter version of that, but it's still a thing. Right? So you don't have to do the full compliance ongoing that a full registered company has to do, but you have to do some form of compliance. Wouldn't it be nice if we could stop that somehow? I'm going to show you the Jedi move. Okay, this is the final slide. I want you to stay with this. This is worth easily $1 million. Let's put this all together. People say that ICOs are dead. People say that utility tokens don't exist. People don't know how to comply with the law. Well, here's what you do. Suppose you're doing the Ethereum sale. You take your pre-functional tokens, which the SEC claims are securities, and you say, good, you know what? You're right. They're securities. You win. Now I'm going to take those things that you say are securities. I'm going to register them with the SEC, or actually qualify them with the SEC for a Reggae Plus sale. That lets me do my own AML. That lets me do my own KYC. That lets me raise $50 million. You complete that sale. You use the funds that you got from the sale to build your platform and to make it functional. The SEC has admitted that once a platform gets sufficiently developed and sufficiently decentralized, a token is no longer a security, like Ethereum. Well, guess what? Once it's no longer a security, you can petition the SEC and say, hey, you know how I've been a reporting company because I've been doing this qualified A+ sale? Well, guess what? I no longer have any securities out there. I just have utility tokens. I want to no longer have to comply with my reporting requirements. So you used A+ to do your initial sale, do it in a compliant way, but you got rid of the biggest hassle afterwards that follows from an A+ sale because your tokens are no longer securities. Okay, that is a Jedi move that is coming. Hasn't been done yet, but once the Blockstack A+ goes through, this is going to be the next issue that they haven't thought of. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to say thank you, and I know there's going to be questions, and ask me anything about securities law. So clap. Ditto. Okay, and then Michael and I always get into it. I'll be gentle with you, buddy. Let's go.
Okay, so a couple things. First of all the things that you say, basically, that the SEC said this or that, isn't it true that they all basically say we're not talking officially for the SEC? This is just my own personal opinion as a commissioner. I mean, every single one I've seen, they have not actually voted on anything, correct?
Oh, great. Okay. Yes, you're right. There's different levels of SEC pronouncements. There's rules and regulations, which are, in essence, the law, unless they go against the securities law. Under the current rules and regulations and the law, this is not there, but the SEC doesn't only operate on that level. You have another level up, which is persuasive but not binding on them. You have SEC releases, and then you have their sort of public statements. I think you're right. It's not official SEC policy yet, but the SEC's under a ton of pressure right now because, as you talked about, they sort of screwed the pooch with the U.S. market, and people are pushing back. I mean, the example I always give is if you I'm from Santa Monica, Los Angeles, California. It's warm. It's nice. Ladies walk around in yoga pants. Okay, everyone's drinking lattes. There's an ocean. There's palm trees. Why would you not set up Ethereum in Santa Monica, California, where it's nice? Why would you go? I mean, is anyone from Zug? Okay, Zug is not exactly the social hotspot of Europe. All right. Why would you set up the Ethereum Foundation in Zug and not in Santa Monica, California? Well, it's easy. Because the US scared them away. I don't blame them. The US is scary with their regulations and their rules. Now, there is a lot of pushback right now. I think you may have stepped out in the beginning. This is a speculative discussion based on what seems to be happening.
But I guess I'm trying to give some practical advice for somebody who's actually looking at following this path. Unless there's been a change, has there been a single Reggae Plus approved for a token?
No, you missed the beginning. So I was talking about how Blockstack has filed.
Right, but still nothing yet.
No.
And also nothing for the Jedi move in terms of the SEC actually saying, gee, this isn't a security now.
No. And again, I'm premising this on the Blockstack thing getting approved. The premise is, it's good points, but I covered this in the beginning. The premise is that Blockstack has not yet been approved. The SEC is being dilatory about it, right? They're kind of not, it's like the EFT. They really should approve it or not approve it, but they're just buying time for some kind of reason, and just like they kind of messed up with the whole kick litigation. Premised on the idea that the Blockstack thing goes through, and putting together the unofficial but non-casual statements from the SEC, I propose that this is going to be the discussion happening next.
And I guess the final thing is, if they do start approving, which they never have, but if they do, you still have to go and essentially be a stock, right? I mean, you're essentially going to be, you're not going to have the liquidity of ever getting on a Binance until you get the SEC to remove that securities stain from you, as opposed to you go to the Bahamas and block the U.S. I like Bermuda right now. It doesn't seem like that's on the SEC radar. Usually they say, well, that's non-U.S. And so that seems like the safest path right now. I realize there's a 1 in a million chance that somebody's going to go after that, but with all the other low-hanging fruit, I still advise clients, and I sound the lawyers who are down with this, to basically block the U.S., go to Bermuda.
I think you weren't in for this part. There's the issue of registering your initial sale with the SEC. I know. Okay, which you may be able to avoid by using an offshore jurisdiction and geofencing out U.S. investors. But for certain kinds of securities, as you know, under the 34 Act, once you hit either 500 or more accredited investors or 2,000 or more any U.S. investors, you then become a public reporting company under U.S. law. So you can do your IEO and your ICO and everything you want outside the U.S. and do it in a compliant way. But once you get over 2,000 unaccredited U.S. investors, well, we're only talking about securities.
I understand, but basically, if I go and I do an IEO, it's rare to get 2,000 investors who are Americans, because again, you're blocking Americans. So it'd be very unusual for 2,000 to slip through the KYC that happens at Binance or whatever. And if you're doing an ICO these days, most of them are to a small amount of funds, and they don't really have these run for the fences, put $5 in anymore. So I don't know. I guess I personally think that there's a lot more risk doing it the way you're saying, but that's my opinion.
Well, let me address that, because I want to get something straight. I agree. Let's distinguish two separate cases. There's the initial issuer sale, okay, and I agree. If they're doing it, it's almost easy to avoid U.S. investors. Well, I wouldn't say that. Between VPNs and everything else, you can make a good show of avoiding U.S. investors. And fine. But if you're selling these pre-functional utility tokens that seem to be securities, you're certainly not limited to 2,000 users. Like Ethereum is not limited to 2,000 users or 2,000 US users. Right? It's the aftermarket, secondary market trading that can get you and shift you into publicly traded company status, not the initial sale.
And it had no statement saying that aftermarket is making something a security, but it's offshore and then it goes on to Binance. I've not seen any.
No, I'm not talking. So if you have something that's clearly not a security, as I mentioned, the SEC has zero jurisdiction, period. They have nothing to say about something that's not security. They can't regulate dogs, commodities, war, or taxes. But there's two kinds of securities. There's things that are obviously securities, like tokens that are paying dividends. But then there's the pre-functional utility tokens, the tokens that will become functional at some point but aren't yet. The SEC, correctly or incorrectly, is asserting that those are securities. No. Hinman has said something can start as a security and then maybe stop being a security. The SEC is super clear that a pre-functional token that you're using to raise money in order to build the platform is a security, and maybe stops being a security later.
They said that after the KIN token, so we'll see if they lose that.
Okay, Tone.
Real quick, it's more like three things I would love for you to address next time you do this presentation. One, what happens when and if, and probably, the SEC finds out that Ethereum is not actually decentralized? Does it go back to being a security? Because it's not. The second thing, how do you claim something is a utility token when it fluctuates in value with speculative trading? So if you're launching something and say it's going to be a utility token like the Ether token, but it's still being traded publicly with a speculative value, I can't possibly see a use case for a utility token that changes in value every second. And the third thing is, who regulates that 50 million investment from Reggae if you don't actually build the platform and your token is never actually successful? What happens to you? So you probably don't have time to answer.
Fast. Okay, Hinman's clear that something can stop. Now again, this is sort of not yet an official SEC release, but when they just gave the presentation to, the whole SEC gave a presentation to Yahoo and some public statements recently, something can go from security to not security, but they also have acknowledged that something can go from not security to security. So if something either never decentralized or re-centralizes, it can become a security again, which is you have to watch it. Then your second one was?
How do you have a utility token that changes in
Got it.
value every second?
Got it. Okay, the fact that something is listed on an exchange and fluctuation in value does not make it a security. Okay, commodities fluctuate in value. Timeshares fluctuate in value. I can put my grandmother's shoes on eBay and they can fluctuate in value. The mere fact that you have exchange-based liquidity and changes in prices, that's a pricing function that does not make it a security. And because that relates to aftermarket trading, it doesn't have to do with the profit motivation of the initial buyers, which is the factor that matters. Now, to your point, does the fluctuation in value argue against it being a utility because many of these platforms should have a stable price in order to actually have real utility? That's a good argument. And in some cases, I'd argue no, because you're trying to meter resources. And when resources get tight, hold on, Tony, I know you want to respond, hold it.
No,
Okay.
we're late on time. I'm actually not going to.
And the third one was, while you're...
Who regulates the 50 million?
Got it. So while you're security, okay, before you do this kind of quantum shift out of being security status, clearly the SEC. You have to qualify your A+ sale with SEC, and while you're still in securities land, SEC all day long.